If history can teach us but one thing, it is that no one can be written off. For while we each will face our doubters and detractors on the carousel of life, they need not define us. Illustrating this point powerfully was a boy who was dealt successive crushing blows to his self-esteem at a tender young age. A boy left isolated, unsupported and unencouraged, and told that he would amount to little. I'm talking, of course, about a boy who would grow up as Winston Churchill. Young Winston Churchill, like any child, wanted nothing more than the attention, admiration and affection of his parents. Yet, when he needed them most in his formative years, they were painfully inaccessible. Winston's parents epitomised the typical British aristocratic couple, and with the political ambitions of his father, Lord Randolph Churchill, as their prime focus, it is fair to say that young Winston wasn't much of a priority. A misfit for the strict codes of discipline enforced in the Victorian boarding schools which he attended, Winston naturally was desperately unhappy and lonely. Effectively estranged from his parents, Winston would pour his heart out into countless letters to his parents, imploring them to visit, for them to show him just a glimmer of affection. But that Winston's parents were not present is not even the most bruising part of this story. For if Winston had any self-esteem left at all with the neglect and lack of encouragement he faced, it would soon be dissolved by the words of his parents. Take this letter, addressed to Churchill when he was just 15 years old, written by his mother, in which she writes, "Dearest Winston, you make me very unhappy. I had built up such hopes about you and felt so proud of you, and now all is gone." Hearing such words from a mother must be crushing to any child, not least from one that is distant and aloof to begin with. But as if that wasn't enough, Winston's father writes him 3 years later to diminish his self-esteem once more. Winston, at the time, had just passed the entrance exam for the prestigious Royal Military College at Sandhurst, but finished 95th out of 389 applicants, meriting entry not into the infantry as his father had wished, but the cavalry. 2 months later, his father wrote, "My dear Winston, there are 2 ways of winning an examination, one creditable and the other the reverse. You have unfortunately chosen the latter method and appear to be much pleased with your success. The first extremely discreditable failure of your performance was missing the infantry, for in that failure is demonstrated beyond refutation your slovenly, happy-go-lucky, harum-scarum style of work for which you have been distinguished at your different schools. Never have I received a really good report of your conduct in your work from any master or tutor. Always behindhand, never advancing in your class, incessant complaints of total want of application. With all the advantages you had, with all the abilities which you foolishly think yourself to possess, this is the grand result, that you come up among the second-rate and third-rate who are only good for commissions in a cavalry regiment. Do not think that I am going to take the trouble of writing you long letters after every failure and folly you commit and undergo. because I no longer attach the slightest weight to anything you may say about your own accomplishments and exploits. Make this position indelibly impressed on your mind, that if your conduct and action is similar to what it has been in the other establishments, then my responsibility for you is over. Because I am certain that if you cannot prevent yourself from leading the idle, useless, unprofitable life that you have had during your school days and latter months, you will become a mere social wastrel, one of the hundreds of the public school failures, and you will degenerate into a shabby, unhappy, and futile existence. Your affectionate father, Randolph. Decades later, and many years after his father's death, Winston was still able to quote much of this letter from memory. But while his father's harsh words may have etched their way into his mind, he did not allow them to impact his psyche, to dent his relentless determination to succeed, or to water down his ambition. Where many would have crumbled, retreated, and withdrew into themselves, Churchill rose above it and used the criticism of his parents as fuel to catapult him upward to the highest office in the land. Incredibly, little did his parents know that they were penning their letters to a would-be future Prime Minister, a would-be future Nobel Prize-winning historian and writer, and a man whose powers of oration proved transformative in fighting back the tide of Nazism in the Second World War. That boy, who his father claimed would degenerate into a worthless existence, would later be considered one of the most influential figures, not just of the 20th century, but in history. That Randolph Churchill never would live to see all that his son would achieve haunted Winston for the rest of his life. In fact, in 1947, Churchill wrote a short story called The Dream, in which his father's ghost appeared before him. He tells him about the momentous events of the 20th century, only for the spectre to disappear in a puff of cigarette smoke before Winston had time to explain his own role in them. Although perhaps not in the form of our parents, like Churchill, we will each inevitably encounter those who think less of us, those who lack faith in us, and those whose abrasiveness act as a test of our character. In responding, we can either rise like Churchill or fall. We need not be prisoners of our past, nor prisoners of what others think of us. Randolph and Jenny Churchill, with letters for the ages.